Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast I do here on my YouTube channel called Your Favorite X-Men, where we take a look at somebody's favorite X-Men character, look at why they resonate, and then just chat about a few of their stories. Today I'm joined by DJ, who is at 616 Rachel Summers on Twitter, and there's usually a bit of a performative tease of who the episode's featured character is, but that username, I guess, kind of gives it away. But I'm going to ask you, regardless, who is your favorite X-Men character?
It's Rachel Summers. It is Rachel Summers. Also, my @ is actually 616 Rachel Summer, because Twitter has a 16 character limit for your @s, which is so frustrating, but
I will make sure that your Twitter handle is accurate on the screen. But anyway, it's Rachel Summers' time. She's a wonderfully complex character that was first introduced to us way back in Uncanny X-Men 141, and then has kind of been just an absolute literary treat to read about ever since. So what is it specifically about Rachel Summers and her stories that hooked you? Why does she stand out among the huge cast that is the X-Men?
I will say, a little bit of background on me, I guess. I've been pretty into X-Men since I think my introduction was the X-Men Evolution cartoon from back in 2003 or whatever, and immediately latched on to so much of this X-Men as lore and the mythology of everything is interconnected. And from such a young age, I have such an appreciation for how the X-Men are not like other superhero teams, in that they are in dire straits most of the time. They are actively fighting their own extinction. And it resonated so hard for me as a young reader who could really feel the stakes through the pages when I started reading and through the cartoons and stuff. And I just feel like Rachel is the face of that corner of the X-Men. You know what I mean? Rachel is, for those who don't know, Rachel is the daughter of Cyclops - Jean Grey - the Phoenix Force a little bit, from an alternate timeline in the future. And in that future, she is a hound, meaning that she's been brainwashed by the forces of humanity to hunt down her fellow mutants using her psychic powers and kill them or incarcerate them. And, live that life. And since then was able to come to our timeline and escape that. But just feeling that weight behind the character, I just am so compelled by.
Yeah, I've mentioned time and time again during these episodes that you can kind of examine any of the X-Men characters and just bear witness to what is likely a tragic past, present, and future. But the trauma of some characters weighs much heavier on their souls than others, and it is almost tangibly coming off the page at times. And I always felt that about Rachel Summers from her early appearances in Uncanny X-Men, and then that grief and anguish, later being explored in Excalibur. And I really felt for her, and I think they capture just the trauma of the character and the anger behind the character because of all that, and the grief as well too.
Absolutely. And also, just really deep connections to so many corners of the X-Men mythos. The bond with Kitty Pryde - Kate Pryde, from the future, that then kind of transcends time as she comes back and befriends her - more maybe. But her connections with Scott and Jean and friendships that she's developed with other people who she knew in her timeline and she had to watch die. I just think it's so interesting to get into that character's head when we do get to, and just get a sense for what that might be like to experience.
So one of the first things that stood out to me rereading Rachel Summers' books is that she's this extremely powerful mutant even when she's first introduced in 141, because we see this insane base power of being able to transfer Kitty's consciousness into the past, and then Rachel eventually physically moves her mind and body into the past as well, which is the X-Men books we read. So I wanted to ask, since you've probably read a lot more Rachel stories than me, the fact that she can do that time displacement seemed so wild to me. Is that an element of the character that's been explored elsewhere? Because that's a pretty strong power feat she's inherently got there.
Yeah, I feel like it, because I know she did it Days of Future Past, and then ultimately through, I believe, her bond with the Phoenix Force of 616. I don't know if that's exactly how that went, but she was able to then displace herself and bring herself to the 616 timeline. I don't know that she does that. She pulls that trick out very often. I'm trying to think, and I can't remember anything off the top of my head where that's been explicitly done. And I can understand why, because it's super OP, and I imagine would people might write themselves into a corner with that power. But I do just love, I love that that's within her abilities. And recently in X Factor, there's a time element of her telepathy being explored. I know, where she's able to touch belongings and see kind of a psychic imprint of what had happened recently. And I think that's kind of an interesting interesting way to go. I love that her telepathy is distinguished from some of the other telepaths like Emma and Jean and Betsy, and that she's, got this time element associated with it.
That's something I really enjoy about the telepaths of the X-Men, is that I think that most of them are distinct in at least the ways they use their powers. And I was either reading or watching an interview with Chris Claremont, and he brought up this idea that often in comics, feminine heroes will have less offensive or physical presenting attacks compared to their male counterparts, who will Hulk out or have these big strength displays. And thinking about Rachel Summers in that context is fun because she's a bit of both in a way, and especially later on in Excalibur, where I'm most familiar with her, when she's imbued with the Phoenix Force, she's a mental dominator, yes, but also very much a physical dominator too.
Absolutely. She's kind of the powerhouse of that team, just in terms of like the feats that we get to see and her, especially visually. I mean, Brian may be like physically stronger than her, maybe, I don't know, but like in terms of the psychic power behind her, she is without a doubt the most powerful person on that team, especially going through her publication history. It's like she really has been on different ends of that, from being like much more psychic and maybe backline, and then being a lot more frontline, formidably in a physical kind of battle sense.
Yeah, and something I also love about the character, because I first read Excalibur before I got to Rachel Summers in Uncanny X-Men, so I didn't have like the complete picture, but now having read it all and rereading for this, it's really nice because in Uncanny X-Men, it just seems like Rachel Summers just does not get a break. It's devastation after devastation. Yeah. And then in Excalibur, well, that whole series is like reeling off of devastation and grief too, I guess, but that's where she's kind of like, that's where she gets her footing and her found family. And that'll get cemented in, and it sort of acts as a safe foundation for her to grow and really become a hero. So I don't know if you agree with that. I'm curious how you feel about her arc in Uncanny to Excalibur, then maybe even onward.
I would absolutely agree with that. Absolutely. I think especially if you look at how her arcs ended in those respective runs. Like Uncanny, her time in that ended, if I'm remembering correctly, with her being hunted by the Hellfire Club, Selene, the X-Men, kind of has zero friends at this point. Wolverine has stabbed her and she's holding her with her psychic powers, just trying to and like that, versus the end of Excalibur, the end of her time in Excalibur, where I believe that's where she sacrificed herself. She traded places with Brian in the time stream. Did that happen in Excalibur? Am I remembering that right?
I honestly do not remember. Excalibur gets very Excalibur's a wild read, and I highly recommend it to anybody.
It's definitely just goofy, and this is also the comics reading experience, a Dash Excalibur experience. Not really being sure what happened, but but yeah, she, from what I remember, she sacrificed herself, trading places with Brian in the time stream so that he could come back to 616, and then that's how she ended up leaving our reality for a little bit. And so it's like, it's such a different vibe to end, your time with these teams, and I think say a lot about the time she spent with them, where she was a little bit more supported and, felt that more maybe during her time with Excalibur.
That's also just like kind of another tragedy of the character, is that she's this loner in a world that isn't really hers, surrounded by familiar faces, but they're familiar faces she doesn't really know. It's people who should be her family and real family in a way, but aren't quite, which also I think aligns with, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one too, I think that aligns somewhat with, whether intentional or not, some of the queer coding of Rachel's character, that kind of sense of isolation from family and friends or other loved ones that I've heard expressed a lot in LGBTQ plus communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we want to get really explicit with it, not that, there's a lot behind this, but like she's outright rejected by Jean when she shows up. Right? Like she does introduce herself to Jean because Jean was not around when she did come back. Jean's like, at this point, been through trials and tribulations with the Phoenix Force and Destiny and all that. And she's like, you're showing up telling me that you're my daughter from an alternate future and we're going to be a happy family. And I just am not going to do this because I'm going to make my own path. And that's devastating for Rachel to hear. And it's not a one-for-one queer allegory, but I think it does speak to a lot of the themes and a lot of the reasons why so many queer people do latch on to this character,
Yeah, that's another wonderful point too. And because the way that I've always been conflicted with kind of the initial Rachel Summers and Jean Grey relationship, because ever since I did the third episode of this series with Alex, who's Blue Romantics on Twitter. They've changed my view of how I read Jean Grey because now I like to read her through the lens of a rejection of matriarchal destiny. And so, like, she just does not want to fit into that role that society wants her to fit into. And I kind of love it from like the perspective of a feminist character. And then Rachel Summers comes in and kind of challenges that in a way. So I like that there's multiple ways that we can go ahead and read that.
Yeah, and can I tell you, I am a huge fan of tension between Rachel and Jean. Like, I think that it's so much more interesting to see them like feel odd about each other, and where their relationship is at any given time. You know what I mean? Like, they can obviously like care about each other, and everybody's living on the moon right now in Krakoa. But I just in my reading of where all these characters are at in their lives in the present comics day, I feel like there's just some interesting tension there, maybe just around like, hey, I'm here. I'm not the woman who raised you. I'm not, the Jean that you knew, and I never will be, and we just kind of have to make this something new, a new relationship. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that dynamic thus far has been fun to read and could definitely, I think, be explored a lot more, as could a lot of subjects with her. Rachel is one of my favorites as well, and I feel like she really needs to just have even more of a lead role in books, because all of those interesting avenues are there and they're just waiting for someone to write about them. But is there any specific plot line or path that you'd like to see Rachel walk down in the future?
Honestly, I really appreciate her appearances in Knights of X. I really like that she is kind of in touch with the Excalibur mutant magic side of things. I think it's familiar. It reminds me a lot of Excalibur, of course, like 80s Excalibur. And it's cool to see her also. We're recording this right after the big Betsy Rachel kiss happened, which is incredible to recognize and celebrate like that she's confirmed a queer character in 2022. That's incredible. But if we're talking about directions I would love to see her go in, I think that they need her on X-Force, to be honest. Like, I think that she needs to be a little bit like using some of her experience to be like kind of proactive and that book is all kinds of things. Maybe not X-Force in its current incarnation, but I do really like the idea of her getting to be defensive and protect with her powers, in this era. I did also like her in Excalibur, or not Excalibur, X Factor, and I feel like that was an interesting book. I don't know how you felt about that.
I know a lot of people love that run in X Factor, but I never got too hooked into it. But that's okay, because not every comic book is going to be tailor-made for my consumption and my consumption only, so I'm glad that others enjoyed it. I did think Rachel Summers was the best character in that, and I really liked the unique usage of her powers in there, like you said, but that's an excellent spot for her in X-Force, actually, and I never would have thought of it, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense with her time-scanning powers especially. And I'm really just a big fan of that book moving in any direction that takes the main spot away from Beast, so yeah, I would love her on that team. Rachel Summers and Domino would also be a lot of fun, I think.
See, like, that's what I'm saying. We gotta pair up with some of those characters over there. I know that Forge is, no longer going to be on that book. I'm assuming he won't be on that book because he's going to join the main X-Men team in 2022. But I also love like the idea of Rachel and Forge hanging out. I feel like they are similarly brooding sometimes, and I feel like they would be friends. Going back real quick to X Factor, what I will say, because I know that book was not everybody's speed, but I felt like in terms of Rachel's position on that team and like on Krakoa, I feel like it was kind of significant to see from her roots as like it was a little bit symmetrical to me that she was a hound hunting mutants to the death, and now she's on X Factor looking for dead mutants so they can be brought back to life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
I thought that a little interesting. I thought that was like an interesting narrative full circle moment for her.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe want her back there, but
Yeah, and I think that can kind of balance out some of her past too, and I would never blame her for it because it's the result of torture and psychological manipulation. But I think back to a powerful Rachel line that stayed with me, and it wasn't explicitly said by her or to her, it was just in a narration bubble, I think, but it was Rachel, and it's a flashback, and she was in her hound gear, and she was being forced to hunt down these mutants who were just trying to escape, and the narration said, a piece of her soul dies with them as they're captured and killed. So I love tying that back in with a more positive way, and sort of equalizing that for the character in a sense.
Definitely.
And on the subject of the Krakoa era, I'm curious what you think Rachel Summers thinks of this current radical era, because I was thinking back to the original dream of Charles Xavier and how textually it seemed in a way that Rachel maybe idealized it a little bit in her younger days. And I'm just drawing from that moment when the X-Men are having a meeting and Rachel's eavesdropping and Nightcrawler is losing his optimism and she's kind of the one that writes his path again. It's also that moment where she learns Jean is dead in this world and she sort of also just goes into crisis mode. So I'm curious if there's maybe any on-panel references I don't remember about her thoughts with Krakoa, or just what you think she'd think about, Krakoa in her current state.
I have like a really strong headcanon for Rachel being like one of the loudest pro Krakoa voices on the island. Even among like the mutants who are having a good time, I feel like she's really here for the mutant nation state. And I don't know if there's like a on-text conversation that speaks to that, but I feel like where I got this from
Mm-hmm.
is, and I'm curious for your thoughts on it, is her Hellfire Gala look for the first Hellfire Gala that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Signed by Russell Dauterman. And it was like, it's a spiky, I'm not sure if you remember it exactly, but it's like a spiky recreation of her hound outfit with like, it comes up over her mouth and she's got like makeup across
Yeah.
her eyes and just spikes all over. And she's got a little leash walking her werewolf hound, amazing baby. But I felt like I saw so much negative reaction to that outfit when the looks were revealed, because it was like, well, why would Rachel want to dress up, wear the suit of her trauma to the first Hellfire Gala? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What I kind of read that as, this is a event for the whole world. Like the Avengers are coming, diplomats from all over the world are coming, and like Rachel taking this opportunity to say, this is why Krakoa exists. Like, look at me. I'm a billboard for what happens when mutants don't have a stake or a say in what happens to us. You know what I mean? And that's completely headcanon. I don't know if anyone's ever confirmed that. I would love if Russell Dauterman, gave us insight into like what went into designing that look. But I just feel like she would be so pro Krakoa, maybe even to a fault, because she has been to the complete opposite end of it.
I really like that interpretation of it, actually. What I got from it when I initially saw the design is that it was trying to make a point about maybe reclamation in a way, and I think that aligns with how you were describing her path in X Factor a bit. But no, yeah, I actually really like your reading of it. I did want to circle back, though, to the Knights of X issue number 4, which came out recently, which had the on-panel kiss of Betsy Braddock and Rachel Summers, of course, and I just wanted to hear your basic thoughts on that, your thoughts on how the character's sexuality has been displayed over the years, and then the actual relationship that we'll now hopefully get to see with Betsy, if you think that's a right choice for Rachel, or if there's another character that, you ship Rachel with.
Yeah. No, I was like so prepared for the ship wars part of this conversation. This is a contentious point for a lot of Rachel fans. People feel all over the map. I
Okay.
mean, for the most part, I would say I probably am a fan of Rachel and Kate. If for no other reason than Claremont kind of confirmed it with Jay and Miles on their X-Men podcast. I believe that was like part of his intention, or that he was writing them with that, through that lens of, I think the phrase he used was that Rachel was Kitty's one true love or something like that, which, especially when I was younger and I heard that, I was like, okay, so set Rachel and Kitty. At this stage, I do like her and Betsy for now. I think it's like cool that they get to be two, because this is just so cool to me that we have two prominent queer women in a relationship together in the X-Men. And these are like A to B list characters, you know what I mean, who have been in the comics since the 80s. And I just think that's like such a powerful, cool thing for the franchise. I feel like Betsy is a little messy, and I say that as a fan of the character. She's made out with Rachel's dad and hooked up with Rachel's brother, and I feel like she's working her way through the family. I feel
Oh
like
no.
I don't know. For now, I would love to see her with with a deep cut. We're getting so many like Krakoa and mutants who maybe had one-off, two-off appearances in the past. I want to say like on the Sword Station, I believe her name is Risque. She's one of the 6 up there who like helps them do their processes up on the Sword space station. I don't know. That's not a queer character as far as I know, but I would love to see Rachel just kind of work her way through some of the Krakoan ladies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. And my baseline assumption for pretty much any character in any media I'm consuming now is that at the very least they're bisexual until stated otherwise. So that could very well be something that happens. And I think it was you. You took a poll on Twitter recently, didn't you, about Rachel Summers' sexuality?
Yes. Like I think the day after the kiss with Betsy, I just was like, "Where's everybody's headcanon at?" Or what do we think? Yeah.
Yeah, I personally, I don't know what the results were of that. I'd love if you could share, but I think I personally voted for lesbian because that's kind of just how I read her when I first encountered her in Excalibur.
I want to say, and I'm checking right now, I want to say that it's 90% people voted lesbian was the sexuality. So, or 80%. And then bisexual, second place with 13%. And yeah, I mean, I think that part of that comes from the fact that Claremont and the various art teams that worked with him back, during her debut, I feel like it was very transparent that there was, that this was a queer character to a lot of people who are reading it. Especially, when I talk to people who are reading comics back then, it seems like this was always something that was kind of understood based on like the coding present in the character and the way she dressed, especially some of those like menswear out moments that we had in early Uncanny.
Hmm.
Thinking especially of when she wore like it was like really big loose gray pants and like a big green blazer over that with like a tie. I don't know. I love the menswear moments on Rachel, and I feel like that kind of communicated something about the character, and especially in a medium where there are not many butch lesbian characters present, I
Hmm.
think that it's cool that Rachel can kind of occupy that space and be that when there just are not many other characters like that.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of just building off that, segueing into another thing, I want to know, as with most X-Men characters, she's been a host to a lot of outfits and looks over the years. And in Excalibur, that series is so fun. They go shopping like so often. We see them just like buying clothes. But
So good.
is there a particular look you're most fond of for her, or that comes to mind when you think of it?
My favorite Rachel look of all time, she's had some great looks, especially in Excalibur, where they were allowed to wear, not allowed to, but they were wearing a lot more civilian clothes in Excalibur than they were in a lot of her other appearances, I feel. But my definitive Rachel look is definitely the Chris Bachalo designed. It's like I always call it like a tendril trench coat. I'm not sure if you know which one I'm referring to, but it's basically a trench coat with spikes on it, with kind of strips of fabric going down the back. And she wears it in like the mid 2000s when she comes back, or not mid 2000s, like mid to 2010s when she comes back from Shi'ar space. Yeah, I just think it's like a really interesting design that takes elements of the Hound design, is very busy and very interesting, and also I feel pretty cinematic just in the way that like the strips of fabric are implied to kind of flow behind her when she uses her powers. It's something that I could really easily see adapted into like a cartoon or some other type of medium, and it's also pretty distinct. So that's definitely my favorite look. But I also just love the OG Hound design. I think it's such a striking visual and such a interesting look, especially when she's got the long braid at the end of her time in Uncanny, especially, and she's on the run. I just think there's some really beautiful panels of her in that time.
Yeah, so I just looked up that trench coat design you're talking about, and that look is really amazing, actually. It's fun too, in a way, because I feel like, and maybe I'm building off nothing, but in a way, it seems like it has tiny homages in it to both Cyclops and Jean Grey. Maybe I'm just thinking the Cyclops because she's got some pouches there, and
Oh yeah.
but
Like, what is this super powerful telepath and telekinetic keep in her pouches? I would love to find out. I need a one-off issue about that.
Speaking of one off issues or maybe even limited series, hope you like this little segue. I'm sure you're familiar with that, like the real connective tissue between Uncanny X-Men and Excalibur was going to be a Rachel Summers limited series that never came to be.
Yeah, I actually don't know much about this beyond knowing that it was in the works and fell through. But what was the deal with that?
So I think there is just little to know about it, but my understanding of what it was going to be, it was that somehow Rachel Summer was going to get sucked into the Mojo verse, and it was going to be a Mojo story, which I'm not always the biggest fan of. It's a part of X-Men that just isn't too interesting to me, but I know it has a lot of fans. So
Yeah.
it definitely would have been cool to see her get a little devoted story back in the 80s. But, just thinking about the perspective, if you were a writer or even a reader at that time, and, she's going from Uncanny to Excalibur, what would you have liked to have seen explored in that series?
Yeah, no, I actually I don't hate to say it, whatever. I am a fan of Mojo and what he contributes because he's so weird. It's just such a weird like moment in time, like snapshot of comic books and like the way that we thought about like television and ratings, and like I just think it's such an interesting thing that totally is inaccessible in 2022. But I would have loved to see within a series like that, like, you know, and maybe this was the plan. I don't know. Like, I think that it picked up right after Uncanny. I think she was picked up by Spiral, and she was implied to have spent some time in the Mojoverse or
Hmm.
something.
I think that's why the werewolves are chasing her in Excalibur. The sword is drawn even too.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that series would have given like a really devoted look at not just like Rachel and her internal monologue, which we had been getting a little bit in Uncanny, of course, especially around the Beyonder stuff and, you know, the duties she feels she has to protect the world and mutants. But I think especially like so much of the Mojoverse stuff is about how you look from the outside, you know, like
Yeah.
if your story was in syndication, this is how it would look, you know, and like I would love to know what Rachel would think seeing that, or just thinking a little bit more about her journey from the outside. You know, I think that actually would be a really interesting avenue to explore with her.
Yeah, that does sound like a story that I'd like to read. And I have to say, my hang up with Mojo and the Mojoverse stuff probably is biased because I think it comes from me being a communication studies major. So throughout my entire like collegiate career, we were just looking at all of that stuff. So when I see it in like the original long shot limited series, and it's just like the satirization of like television and news and whatnot, it just feels like what I did for 4 years in college. And I feel the imminent drain of research papers and whatnot coming back
Oh,
to me.
I don't, I don't blame you. College sucks. But I think Rachel would probably agree with that. But yeah, college sucks.
Yeah, and I like the perspective that you've given because previously I was like, taking a step back, like what connection, like why were they going to go that route? Rachel Summers and Mojo, I wouldn't necessarily think immediately to pair together, but when you put it from, sort of that lens of self-examination, I actually see it could be really interesting.
Yeah, and you know, Rachel, I think also has really weird connections. Like I think I did say this earlier, but like to so many different corners of the X-Men's universe. The fact that like her villains, when I think of like who are her antagonists, we have Nimrod, Selene, Mojo, I guess Phoenix dash, you know, general kind of Phoenix anxiety and am I in control? Am I out of control? Just like really interesting connections to those different areas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, although when it comes to the Phoenix, I don't know if it's been changed. I thought that like on panel, Rachel's original sort of take on the Phoenix was that it is not like the monster that some have seen it as. It's something that can be controlled and used for good. I'm forgetting a little bit, but she seemed to embrace it a lot more than other characters did.
No, absolutely. And I think that to this day, she is like the one person whoever's been possessed by the Phoenix or, you know, the host of the Phoenix. I guess except for Echo now, because Echo seems to be fine in the Avengers comics that are happening. I don't read that.
Oh, that's who has
Um,
that character showed up in Judgment Day, and I was like, wait, what Avenger is using the Phoenix Force right now? I was so confused by that.
yeah.
It's Echo, okay.
Yeah. I think she's the one who was able to avoid corruption up until this point. So she definitely, and I think part of that has to do with the fact that, and I don't think we've talked about this yet, but the fact that she's a multiversal anomaly, that there isn't really another version of her across the multiverse. She is like the only version of herself that is like Jean and the Phoenix, you know, being her parents, you know, and I think that that's just really, it's really interesting. And I like that it leads to her not going down some of those same roads that we've seen where she is corrupted. I just was thinking of like when she back in Uncanny was like acting a little reckless and pulling off the X-Men's life forces without their permission and stuff like that, where maybe it just is that she, you know, isn't necessarily corrupted, but is like feeling some of that. Like I have the power to do what I want to do. What's to stop me? You know what I mean?
That definitely mirrors Jean in a way at times
Yeah.
because, Jean is also, she has the tendency to lean into her darker side. They both have this, if they don't see a pathway to, reach their goals, they will bulldoze and kind of create the pathway, which is something I can appreciate from both characters. And I wish they'd lean into that with Jean a little bit more, actually. And maybe that's why Rachel kind of has, I enjoyed a lot of her character because it seems like they do a little bit more with her.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, like who wants to read about like responsible psychics? You know what I mean? Like we know, like if this was a real thing, if there were psychics, like, you know, you would be kind of nudging and doing things, you know. I just think it's interesting, especially to see how a character like Jean or Rachel might rationalize, scanning someone's thoughts or, making someone make a decision, like I just think it's interesting to get into the politics of being a psychic, which honestly, they haven't really done as much as you would think in X-Men comics.
Yeah, that's true. And I will say though, I have enjoyed kind of, and I think I've seen them mostly in Excalibur, the little moments of that we've gotten through Rachel Summers. And normally that will be in an instance where it seemed like there was like bits in that book where people were just rude to Rachel, or they would violate her personal space and like touch her, mostly men coming up to hit on her and whatnot. And she would just, it's almost as if she was pushing them in real life, but she would give them just a psychic nudge pretty much, but like a pretty brutal psychic nudge to get them off her. And I loved seeing those scenes in Excalibur.
Yeah, it's so cool, and it speaks to the queer coding a little bit. The fact that like 95% of what I remember from Excalibur involves like Rachel rejecting a man at some point during the storyline. You know what I mean? Like that happened more than once, a few times. So
yeah, I think you posted one of them recently, even on Twitter, and it was I laughed so hard when I read this scene originally. It was a police officer hitting on Rachel Summers, and she just very nonchalantly, not even looking at him really, I think, is just like, yeah, I don't date cops. And then I think his response is like, I'll quit the force.
Yeah, like, no, she's worth it. But yeah, no, she doesn't date cops. I love knowing these little things, like just, thinking about her worldview, or whether or not that was something she has a lot of thought behind, or if that was just something that she was saying to get this person off her back. Like, I love that.
Yeah, it's those little character moments for me that make the X-Men books stand out a lot more than maybe some other comic books that I've read in my lifetime. And that is, like I said, part of the reason that I like Excalibur a lot, because as you mentioned, they are in their civilian clothes a lot because there's a lot of downtime too that is just basically drama between the characters. There's love triangles. Excalibur is, and this should be a selling point, by the way, for anybody listening. Excalibur is like one of the most promiscuous X-Men books. It's one of the, for lack of a better word, I guess I just use promiscuous, but it's one of the horniest X-Men books. And I think that makes it a lot of fun to read.
Absolutely. And it's not just one person either. I love that, like, you have like the Brian and Megan saga, which is ridiculous and, gets all kinds of real life, heavy stuff. Nightcrawler, I feel like truly getting to be like sexually liberated in the way that like a lot of people like celebrate today.
Yep.
A lot of that's roots is in Excalibur, which is so fun. Yeah, and even Kate or Kitty, I feel like you got to see her kind of grow up in a lot of ways and start thinking and talking about dating in some more explicit ways, which is so. It's just interesting to see like these characters in that book get to be so human. I think that's where my appreciation for Excalibur comes from, the romantic elements of that, and I feel like that's what makes X-Men so fun. Like whenever I think of what I like about X-Men in general, it's so much of it is like the relationship drama and the pine. And I want to be with. I like Forge. If I'm Storm, I like Forge, but he also created this weapon that took away my powers, and I have to deal with like, can I love someone through? I just think stuff like that is so interesting, and somewhere where comics really excel in terms of a story.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that too, because something that I've said a lot on this channel is that, like, I love a good like punch kick fight as much as the next guy, but what always brings me back to X-Men and what I'm looking for most in it is just like the interpersonal relationships of the team and all the drama that ensues from that. I think that is when I get the most enjoyment out of my books. And X-Men is just like a series that has made me just notice all of this stuff so much more, the deeper parts of characters. It even has gotten me interested in like character design and the fashion of characters and like what that says specifically. That's why the Hellfire Gala has been so fun for me, although they didn't release as many looks this year, but still.
Yeah. And honestly, like, shout out to the artist community on X Twitter who are pumping out incredible designs on incredible designs for these characters, a lot of the time just for fun. And it's so cool to see like different people's interpretations of like, what would this character wear to the Hellfire Gala? It's like one of my favorite parts about the event at this point.
Yeah, and I'll put it up on the screen here if I can find it, but there's even a group of artists on X Twitter that are doing reimaginations of, they're like all grouped together and they're doing reimaginations of characters. I'm sure you've seen some of these pop up, but those are so exciting for me to see whenever there's a new one coming out, because I just go to the blog page that they're hosted on and I get to see just an array of awesomely designed, re-envisioned X-Men characters, and that is so exciting.
Yeah, it's like I think what you're talking about. It's like 20 people like come up with their own Polaris design or Karma design, and like we get to kind of see where everyone's take is. I think it's so fun.
It really is great, so everyone should check that out. But circling back to Rachel Summers, I wanted to mention that with this latest read through, I've even started looking at her as an allegory in a way for scientists and experts warning humanity about like very real environmental threats or whatnot, but the refusal of those in power to listen. And I say that because she has knowledge of this doomed future that she needs to desperately prevent, but it's almost like nobody wants to take that threat seriously, and it's more convenient for them to just kind of ignore her plight in totality.
Yeah. No, Rachel Summers is an inconvenient truth, you know, like she is definitely a like omen that's really difficult to really sit with. Like this is a, you know, young woman who's experienced the hell that we're all trying to prevent. And in general, I think her presence did make a lot of people uncomfortable, which I could totally see. You know what I mean? Like, I can imagine how difficult, you know, as difficult as it is for her, of course. Like, I imagine people just don't even really know what to say to her.
Yeah, it makes me think, especially of those moments where I think there's one with Charles Xavier where she's like, you know, I was able to fend myself off a bit from Celine because of everything you taught me. And obviously, like, he's a figure that meant something to her and meant a lot to her. And then his response is like, I've never taught you anything. I don't even know who you are, which it's got to hurt a little bit. I mean,
yeah, just nobody acknowledging her. I mean, I'm curious to hear more about your environmental. Is it like the environment like take with kind of what Rachel could represent?
well, that's more of an example. I don't explicitly mean environmental, but I'm just thinking about, you know, kind of what's been going on in the world for the past couple of years with imminent threats on the horizon that certain people on certain sides of the aisle willfully choose to obscure or ignore. And Rachel Summers made me think of that because she is basically signaling that doom is coming and we need to take action, and everyone is just ignoring it and doing their own thing and not coming together to pay the proper attention to what's going on.
I was going to ask you actually, that totally makes you think of this one Rachel appearance. It's a real deep cut. I don't know if you read Generation Hope yet, the book from the Utopia era, where Hope kind of leads a mutant team out of San Francisco. Yeah, it was coming out around the time that I got into comics. I'm not sure if you have much familiarity with it.
No, unfortunately, that's a Summers character that I know pretty much nothing about aside from that one issue of Immortal X-Men that came out recently. So yeah, I really don't know what Hope's deal is even. I learned like a week ago or 2 weeks ago that she was Cable's daughter.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, it's she's for the purpose of this conversation, Hope is not important. So,
Okay.
but I do look forward to your Hope episode. So when you learn more about what her whole deal is. But in this Generation Hope issue, it's a tie into Schism, and it's when they open up a museum about mutant history in San Francisco that the X-Men go to the opening.
Oh, okay.
And there is a whole segment, which I think is so silly and fun, focused on time travel and like time displacement. And there's a video that it says is from the archives of Charles Xavier featuring like a sit down with Rachel. And it's like 1 or 2 pages, and I'll probably send them to you after this.
Yeah, definitely.
But she's talking about her history as a hound, and it's very emotional. She's crying toward the end of her speech that she's giving, but she's talking about how she sits and tells people about her past and what she did and what she experienced and the torture and the years of brainwashing. And she has people looking back at her, and she knows that to them this is not real. This might as well just be a story. It doesn't mean anything. But it literally happened to her. And the people around her all died. And this is just something that people in this reality just cannot really acknowledge or see, you know, as legitimate. Mm-hmm. Which is so heartbreaking to really think about. Again, when you really get into the brain of this character, like I can't even imagine what that must feel like. But in that speech, she also talks about how she used to psychically hide her face tattoos, but that she stopped doing that around this time because she wants people to not just look past her and her experiences, which probably feeds into my Hellfire Gala headcanon. Yeah, I think that your take is really, really apt on kind of what she represents, you know, politically.
Please do send me that speech because I'd love to read it, because it sounds like it also connects back into one of the arguments she used against Nightcrawler wanting to, I think Nightcrawler's position was humans don't care about us. Let's not care about them. What is the point of the X-Men right now? There's Avengers and Fantastic Four. They're not as hated as we are. Just let them handle things. And Rachel Summers uses sort of what you're saying they use here as well. She says, did the deaths mean nothing of everyone who died in my future? Because if we give up here, they meant nothing. So I love that they bring that back.
Yeah, no, Gillen, that is maybe the only time that Kieran Gillen has written Rachel. And that is like if we get any type of Rachel solo project, Gillen's like top of the list for me to potentially take that. Cause I just thought that was such an interesting, beautiful, well summed up 2 pages on like this character and why she's so cool. So I'll definitely send those to you.
With that, I think this is a good place to wrap up. I would like to hear from you your recommendations for people who are interested in getting to know Rachel Summers as a character, which stories you think best embody her, which you would tell a new reader to start with.
I would say Uncanny. It's 140. Was it 141? Is that is the
Mm-hmm.
I honestly just starting there and then kind of following her arc through to the Uncanny 190. The 190 is when her arc kind of concludes, and then following that straight into Excalibur, I think is like an excellent way just to like get a sense for where the character's been. Yeah, and then after that, I would definitely say she's had some lulls. I haven't read all of the Uncanny stuff, but I know there's some pretty significant stuff that happens in the mid 2000s related to her relationship to Jean Grey's family,
Mm-hmm.
her grandparents, and why she hates the Shi'ar, which is so fun. But they did her dirty for sure. I would say following that, and honestly, like I think if you want to start with like X Factor, in the Krakoa era, I think that's also a great start point just to like get a sense for where this character's at now. I think that the current kind of like tone around her and the way that she's being written, I'm pretty happy with, and I'm excited to see what comes next. I think she'll definitely be in whatever Knights of X spins out into, and I think that hopefully that'll be a great jumping on point for new readers too. So
Okay, and those are some good recommendations, and I wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciated all your insights about Rachel Summers, who is such a good character, such a fun character. I'm so glad we got to talk about her.
yeah, no problem. Anytime. This was great, and I had a lot of fun talking about Rachel. So yeah, this is awesome.
And a big thank you to you all, too, if you made it this far into the episode. I really appreciate you listening, and the best way to show support so I can continue to do these projects on my channel that include analysis and podcasts like this is to leave a comment, leave a like, or even subscribe. With that, have a great rest of your day, guys.